Well, today I'm going to do a review of John W. Campbell Jr.'s Who Goes There, which is actually a pretty big topic. We have the original 1950s The Thing, which I didn't think was really Who Goes There much at all. Here's John Carpenter's version in DVD. Actually, this is my Blu-ray copy of it here, which is just great. This is fantastic stuff. And this movie is almost the short story, which is more of a novella. And I think this is a pretty darn accurate portrayal of the short story. Here's the DVD version. I've had this a long time. Really great stuff, fun to watch, and so that's where we are with that. I'm going to start with Adventures in Time and Space. Just as I finished my reread and research of John W. Campbell's Who Goes There about 10 days ago, I noticed Liminal Spaces had done a review on this same topic, and the consequent films and publications, and I highly recommend that. I will try to show a few different things here. John W. Campbell Jr., June 8th, 1910, July 11th, 1971, 61 years. Most SF folks know that I will refer to John W. Campbell as JWC from here out. JWC was a massive influence on all SF and was first a fan, an author under his name and his pseudonym, and then approximately 33 years long employee / editor of Astounding, then Analog 1937 through 1971. He was the only editor May 1938 through July 1971. John Campbell guided a large group of science fiction authors that produced many new and original concepts in science fiction, and they did that with the guidance of a great editor and experienced author. His accomplishments are enormous. Who Goes There seems to have been worked on for a year or so by the young John Campbell. Placing the exact year it was written is difficult. I can find no exact year that Argosy rejected it, but possibly that was 1936 or 1937. Then several revisions followed. So JWC was roughly 26 years old when this story was first written. JWC wrote SF frequently using a variation of his first wife's name, Dona Stewart, which he changed to Don A. Stewart, among a few other pseudonyms. I will, in my review, have a link to the Internet Archive copy of the August 1938 Astounding, containing the original illustrations. The magazine now sells for around $1,000. I should have bought one back in 1970, and I believe I could get it back then for around, like $30. And I have the link there, and it will open up to the page the story starts on. I will also reference in this review Adventures in Time and Space, 1946 by Raymond J. Healy and J. Francis McComas. The Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 2A, 1973 by Ben Bova and the SFWA. The Best of John W. Campbell, 1976 by Lester Del Rey. And The World Turned Upside Down, 2005. This is a good anthology by David Drake, Eric Flint, and Jim Bain. I think that the golden age of science fiction might really have begun with Who Goes There. A.E. Van Vogt's Black Destroyer is a better written story, and easier to follow. However, Black Destroyer is patterned after JWC's technique in Who Goes There. If you read the descriptive prose detailing the environment of the location in the first paragraphs of JWC's story and the depictions of the characters, and then read Black Destroyer, you will see some similarities. And again, that is not a criticism. Everybody learns from what has come before. Van Vogt's Black Destroyer, Discord in Scarlet, Vault of the Beast. Vault of the Beast, of course, was almost certainly where the Liquid Terminator and Terminator 2 came from. All of Van Vogt's works, and he was very strongly inspired by John W. Campbell Jr.'s works, really influenced a lot of what we call science fiction, and Campbell influenced that even more. So I'm going to take a peek here at the Adventures in Time and Space editors of what they thought of John W. Campbell's story, Dona Stewart, and it's pretty brief. But clearly they included it in the anthology and they liked it quite a bit. But I'm going to read a bit of the descriptive prose that I was talking about. And this is John Campbell. Lingering odors of machine oil contrasted sharply with the taint of harness dressing and leather. Recall that they are in a frozen environment. They have sled dogs and machines to work with and all this. And they're crammed into these buildings that they pretty much have to stay in or freeze to death. So harness dressing and leather, yet somehow through all of that reek of human beings and their associates, dogs, machines, and cooking, came another taint. It was a queer, neck-ruffling thing, a faintest suggestion of an odor alien among the smells of industry and life. And it was a life smell. But it came from the thing that lay bound with cord and tarpaulin on the table, dripping slowly, methodically onto the heavy blanks, dank and gaunt under the unshielded glare of the electric light. So I can paint a picture in my mind of that pretty well. Adventures in Time and Space is the 12-chapter version of Who Goes There. And this is an excellent anthology. It's about 1,000 pages, as I recall. And I would recommend this to everyone. So, I will include in my written review a quote by A.E. Van Vogt from the Fantasy Review of October-November 1947. And he's talking about, A.E. Van Vogt is talking about reading Who Goes There by John W. Campbell. And here's what Mr. Van Vogt has to say about that. I read half of it standing there at the newsstand before I bought the issue and finished it. That brought me back into the fold with a vengeance. I still regard that as the best story Campbell ever wrote and the best horror tale in science fiction. A.E. Van Vogt went on to write Vault of the Beast, which he really kind of learned how to write that one from Campbell's Who Goes There, and Vault of the Beast was published in the August 1940 issue of Astounding. I have a link here where you can read the whole article in the written review. Now, again, the Who Goes There influence on written SF, film SF, all SF is massive. A noticeable influence on Invasion of the Body Snatchers by Jack Finney. And I will have a link to the black and white movie that was directed by Don Siegel back in the mid-1950s. And that movie and the book itself is great. Now, this is my... I had to buy another copy of the Science Fiction Hall of Fame Volume 2A. I have misplaced my copy, or loaned it out and never gotten it back. Edited by Ben Bova. And here, Mr. Bova discusses the votes that were taken back in the, I believe it was 1972, for the best long short story of the time in history at that point. Who Goes There was number 1 by John W. Campbell Jr. And Mr. Bova includes in this publication, again, the same 12-chapter version of the story that was in Adventures in Time and Space. And really quite of a great story. I've always enjoyed it immensely. So next, we will take a peek at Lester Del Rey's The World of Science Fiction. In here, he also discusses the golden age of science fiction and John W. Campbell Jr., along with a whole lot of other stuff. This is a great SF reference. And the reason why I'm bringing it up will be clear here in just a moment. And just an all-around great reference for American science fiction, and I recommend this quite a bit. So my next reference book will be The Best of John W. Campbell Jr., edited with an introduction by Lester Del Rey, which is why I was showing you his great reference book there. I will read just a bit here in and out of this, but not much. We have the best short stories John W. Campbell wrote, and they are all worthwhile. Twilight and The Invaders, Forgetfulness, Cloak of Acer, here's Who Goes There. And I'm using one of Richard's cards as a bookmark here. Thanks a lot, Richard. I appreciate it. I'm always low on bookmarks. Here is what Lester has to say, excuse me, about Who Goes There in this great selection of John W. Campbell Jr.'s works. Who Goes There is a suspense story, something neither Campbell nor his alter ego Stuart had tried before. It is the story from which the movie The Thing, later called The Thing from Another World, was supposedly made. But the movie was just another monster epic, totally lacking in the force and tension of the original story. Who Goes There was chosen by the science fiction writers of America as first among the greatest novellas of all time. In only 10 years, John Campbell had become two of the greatest writers of science fiction, and then he goes on to become the greatest editor of all time, of course. Here's this copy that Lester includes in this great book, and it is the 14-chapter version. I read them closely. The differences are pretty minor, and I think you can read either version and understand the story just fine. So that leads me to another great anthology that I'd mentioned earlier, The World Turned Upside Down, by David Drake, Eric Flint, and Jim Bahan. And there are a lot of great stories in this anthology, and I would recommend it to anybody and everybody. Let's see if I can find the chapters. I don't think it actually has a chapter page in it. Or a breakdown. Yeah, yep, there it is, table of contents. And I have not quite read the whole book yet. I just got it recently. I am down to Campbell, which is what I'll be reading next in this. But here we have a discussion of John W. Campbell and who goes there. And this is the 14-chapter edition again. And I have one of Richard's cards here. And what a great illustration there from Astounding of Black Destroyer. Campbell is today, this one is written by Eric Flint. Campbell is today much more often remembered as the editor of astounding science fiction than he is as a writer in his own right. But when I was a kid, a lot of his stories were still readily available. There was a time when I devoured his space operas and swore that Doc Smith's Lensman couldn't hold a candle to the intrepid crews of Campbell's galactic-scale adventure novels. Well, that was then and this is now. This is from 2005. And the verdict of history is pretty much in. Campbell was in fact a central figure in SF, even a towering one. But it's his influence as an editor that has lasted. His own fiction has pretty much vanished except for this story. Well, I have his fiction. And so that's going to do it for me.